The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
All right, we're back. Mike, yet another episode of the Unlikely Innovators.
Yet again.
You can't keep us down. We come back every month with another episode. This month, of course, we have Rob Fraser, who is the CEO and founder of Outway and Custom Lab. Really cool to talk about socks because you and I are a lover of fine socks. So it was a really good episode to have that on.
Plus, it was a first in Unlikely Innovators history because Steve asked Rob about his thighs, which I don't think we've ever asked a guest about their legs before. But the reason Steve did that is because Rob was a 5-time member of the Canadian National Cycling Team. So there was a reason there. There was a
He
reason.
was okay with it too. I think you'll find that it was a good icebreaker, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think it was. I think you disarmed him, with your charm as you always do. But I think maybe because you and I got to know Rob a little bit better in our conversation before we talk a little bit more about the episode you're about to hear, maybe I'll formally introduce Rob. So as Steve mentioned, Rob is the CEO of Outway and Custom Lab, but he's also an entrepreneur and, as I mentioned, a former 5-time member of the Canadian National Cycling Team. In 2016, Rob founded Outway and has grown the company into one of North America's top sock brands. Alongside building Outway, Rob founded Custom Lab, a private label apparel company that works with Disney, Red Bull, Uber, and many other global brands. Rob currently serves as the CEO of both companies. Rob's passion for creating an ambitious future continues through his private investments in inspiring founders and philanthropic work supporting various athlete foundations and entrepreneur organizations. So,
yeah, and he got to talk about each of those things, which I'm really happy about. So
yeah, no, I thought it was, again, I think what was cool about talking with Rob is I think obviously, from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think he dropped a lot of interesting nuggets there. I think hopefully very instructive for anybody that's, either on that entrepreneurial journey or is thinking about getting on that journey. But I also think it was cool that we watched him in real time, I think kind of articulate some of these things that you think about. And I think that kind of made me think of the podcast a little bit more differently as well, as that it is oftentimes an opportunity for you to kind of express things that you may otherwise not say out loud, during the day, right? So,
yeah, it seems like he was working out some really good concepts in real time, which you'll see. So it's a really valuable thing, not only for the listeners but sometimes for the guests. So there you go.
so I think without further ado, I feel like I say that every episode. I got to stop doing that.
Well, we
Um,
could say something like, instead of us talking about it, how about we hear from Rob in his own words?
all right, we're back and we're joined by Rob Fraser, who is the CEO of Outway and Custom Lab. Rob, thanks for joining us on the Unlikely Innovators.
Happy to be here.
So we often talk about our guests and their unlikely journeys, although sometimes they're not that unlikely. And so what we wanted to start with you is, before we talk about Outway and Custom Lab, you took sport management at Commito College. So it's always great for us to tie in the college piece to this podcast because it is a college applied research podcast. When you were at Commito, was it your goal to start a business, or did that kind of happen unintentionally as a result of your journey there?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't enroll in college or even have the idea to start a business while starting in my first year. So the original kind of goal, I'll walk it back even a little bit further. Before going to sport management college, I was a competitive cyclist. So I was a professional cyclist for almost 10 years, 5 times in the Canadian national team. And so I was actively in sport on the athlete side. And then when I retired from sport, I was like, the logical next step seems like getting an education in sport and then a job in sport. And so naturally, a sport management program seemed like the obvious choice. And so I enrolled, I got in. And so that was the initial motivation, was to kind of go on more of that traditional path and get the education. The cool thing about where I went to school in Camosun here on Vancouver Island in Victoria is it shares the same building as the Canadian Sport Institute of the West Coast, I guess. And so there's the kind of athlete center there. And so I simultaneously got a job while in school working at the Sport Institute. So I was kind of doing both at once, getting the education and getting the job experience. And at that time, if you had asked me, like, what are you going to do with your life? That was going to be the track, was to finish the education, continue to work my way up in this organization and perhaps others. But it was definitely with this idea of going more of a traditional route and pursuing a career in just the sport industry, whether a coach or an athlete services or what. I didn't really know what, but no, certainly not starting a business was not the primary goal, but it definitely was the catalyst for getting started, because it was really a way out of realizing that being in school and working in that path and that track that I was on wasn't going to do it for me. So it was almost like a somewhat of a crisis I found myself in. I was like, if this is it, and this is like the next, 40, 50 years of my life, or however long it was going to be, I was like, I've got to make some hard pivot here and try to figure out a new path coming out of sport. This just wasn't fulfilling.
Rob, this isn't on the list, but do you still have super jacked thighs? Because I've seen cyclists on the Olympics before, and they're pretty impressive thighs.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I'd say it's one of my redeeming qualities. Yeah, I'm not going to stand up and give it a show right now, but I'd say if there's one part of me that still stands out, I'm wearing like a 5-inch short. I've got
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
legs.
Yeah, I know that resonates with Mike here, because I know he's all about the ever creeping shorter shorts. Socks are actually a huge point of contention in my household. My wife never wears matching socks. She often has her socks fall down in her boots. Um, One of the things, just like put bluntly, why socks? What led to that? How do you draw the line now from Camosun College and the story you just told us to where you are now?
Yeah, so it ties right into it really, because in cycling, in particular, socks are a big part of the culture. So they're actually like a very considered and um, obvious part of kind of what a cyclist wears, and we put a lot of thought into it, whether it's expressing how we feel that day in terms of just your individuality, or matching a certain part of the rest of your kit or bike. Socks were a big part that you thought about actively when like getting dressed each day. And then after getting out of cycling, I took that same mindset into life. And so, like, I always wore kind of cap height crew socks with funky designs on them at school. And, like, oddly enough, while in school, I was already kind of coined the sock guy, because I'd always wear, like shorter shorts, showing off my sick legs, obviously. And then I've got the socks on, and kind of just like that cyclist athlete look. Um, and, uh, and that was kind of like, yeah, I was being called the sock guy. But then what I realized was like, when I had the idea that I want to start a business, and like we can maybe get into that story, but I had this kind of like aha moment that I think like starting a business sounds like a cool path to go on. In my mind, it was kind of like the sport of business. This was like a new thing I could apply that energy to and really go after. When I was trying to think of like what business would I start, I was like, I like socks, and I think there's an opportunity to make them better. Socks at that time had remained very use case specific. So whereas the rest of what we wear in a day was moving much more to athleisure wear, where like the kind of worlds of athletic wear and casual wear and dress wear were kind of merging into this all day. Like everything I'm wearing right now, short of my socks, is basically Lululemon, who were like one of the leaders in that space of kind of creating casual outfits that you can exercise in or wear, and it looks pretty good. I like the same sweater, which is really nice. I like ran on the weekend in it, right? So it's like it's very functional and useful. So the simple idea was like, why are socks still running socks or dress socks or cycling socks? Like, why is there no yoga pant for the foot? Was kind of the simple way I rationalized it to myself. I was like, there needs to be some combination of a technical yet comfortable yet beautifully designed pair of socks that you could use all day for different activities. And ultimately, I was solving my own problem, because at the time I was still training and I was competing at the time in some triathlons, and I was working and I was going to school. So three different things I was doing through the day that required three different sort of outfit levels. And like my school was quite casual, work you had to dress up, and then obviously in the gym you wanted something athletic. And I found myself like carrying this massive backpack to school each day with different outfits for all of it. I was like, man, I should only need one pair of socks for this. And so that was really kind of like, socks were something that was, already a part of kind of my lifestyle. um, it seemed like a problem that I was facing and could solve. And the risk to me seemed quite low. Like socks are relatively inexpensive. They're not that complicated to get started. They're complicated to do at scale and improve, but not complicated to get started. So that was like the real simple insight. And just like I took $1,000 from my student loans at the time, taught myself how to design the socks. I sourced the manufacturer. I bought 230 pairs and then just started selling them. And that was kind of how we got going in the fall of 2016.
And you're just doing like hand-to-hand sales at that time at Camosun?
Yeah, just hand-to-hand combat near stake. I took a Tupperware of socks to school. Like basically, like my sales pitch at the time was like, "We're friends, but you don't buy this. We're not friends." So it's quite simple. And
Pretty good.
that worked, and we sold out of the product in a few days, which was surprising And, like to get a product and have people, bet on you and buy it is one thing. To have them like it and want to buy more is another. And thankfully, we had created a great product and people really liked it. And that initial pair we sold is not, it's not so much different than what we sell now, honestly. Like it's changed a lot in very small ways, but the very core of it, I'd say we were 80% there day one, which is pretty cool. And a lot of luck was involved in that, but the product was great. People wanted more. So we just doubled down, took all the money we made, bought twice as many, and got a little over 700 pairs just in time for Christmas from 2016. Sold those, launched a Shopify store at the same time, started selling kind of, around. My neighbors from where I used to live in Ontario started buying socks. And, you know, like when you start anything new, your friends and family are kind of supporting you and you're getting all these sales. And, the real moment where it was kind of like, oh, maybe we have some ears when I finally saw someone wearing them that I didn't know. I don't remember how long after it was, but it was pretty soon after. So yeah, just hand to hand. From there, then we, pretty shortly after started doing more hand to hand, but setting up booths at local races. So biking races or running races. So I was thinking like, where are the other communities I'm involved in outside in school where I can basically like just incentivize people to buy these, that they're going to more take a bet on me. And that's kind of the initial goal, and just slowly but surely built that up.
I had a sock moment in the summertime. We went to a friend's camp in Quebec, and my buddy and I, who I think we're always trying to outduel each other on who has the most stylish stuff, the once a year that we meet at this camp. And I was wearing like low cut socks with my running shoes. He's like, you look like an old man. Like that's out of style. And like all the kids now have like the higher up socks. So he was giving me a hard time about that. So I'd never considered that. And then you go to the gym and you can tell like who are the millennials and who are like people of my age, because we've got the low cut socks still. And I think you, like Steve and I, are probably a little bit older than you, but there was a time like, when we were going in university, when all of a sudden like you started to see more funky, colorful socks kind of being, the thing that everybody had to have. And like I think back to my dad, and like he wore dress socks like all his life in business, but I don't ever remember him having like any like interesting pairs of socks. They're always pretty like either black or gray or whatever they were. Do you have any thoughts as to why you think that kind of coalesced around that time when people started to see socks as a way to kind of express themselves? Obviously, in your case, it was a part of cycling as a way to probably identify yourself, and also kind of just, maybe those are your like your race day socks. But any thoughts on why people finally woke up and thought that, hey, I have to cover my feet, but I might as well kind of use it to, to differentiate myself?
Yeah, the movement sort of started back in maybe early mid 2000s, like 2008 onwards, where socks really started to become popular, like fancy socks or design socks. And really where it came out of was Wall Street, where guys in a sea of sameness, so wearing suits, wanted to differentiate themselves basically. And so like it's where like kind of the dress sock craze started. It's like when you're in the boardroom, you're seated, you cross your leg and a bit of sock shows. It's like that was your only moment where you could actually be differentiated from the crowd, where you're in this very stiff, very uniform environment with suits. And it's like, how do you express that you have any personality or individuality? That trend then went into everyday life, but as well as sports. So cycling, running, other areas where everyone, especially in competitive sides of those sports, where you've got kits, you're given something you have to wear, whether it's a team uniform or a school uniform or whatever. It's basically a way that you could have and express individuality in a uniform setting. And then people would take that into their everyday life as well, like myself. Like I typically wear all black. Like you can see the top of me, and my bottom's just the same, black pants, like very kind of like dark colors often, but I'll wear, generally speaking, louder socks. That's my little piece of me. That's what you'll see. And depending on my mood or where I'm going or what I'm doing, there's different socks for different ways I'm feeling. And that was true of life. And people kind of, our culture also moved away from wearing very loud clothing. Everyone's a lot more muted these days, and and then you accessorize. So the other areas people accessorize, like jewelry, sunglasses, hats, socks. These are the things that you buy, and you have a variety of different styles, colors, designs, and ways you kind of dress up and down. But if you look in the average closet right now, it's a lot more monotone. Like for me, it's just black t-shirts, black shorts, black pants. Like, and they look at my sock drawers, quite different. Look at my hats, they're quite different. Shoes, even a little bit different. So I think people, I don't know what happened, but in the culture, and it certainly started kind of in work and sport than life, people were just looking for ways to express themselves, and socks kind of cemented themselves in this category of accessory, not apparel. And I think that's why you saw the craze take off.
Yeah, I think my analogous situation, Mike, was that my dad, he had a logging company I've mentioned on the show before, and his were the gray and white work socks, the
Yeah.
wool work sock.
Yeah.
And that would be for every occasion. I swear to God, he got married in them as well. But um, I think to the layperson that doesn't think about this very much, socks are foot coverings that haven't changed in a long, long time, right? From the knitted socks of years gone by to the more performance socks we see now. Um, how is and just one quick funny aside, I'm really glad that the trend of not wearing socks and dress shoes is sort of departing because I found that sort of kind of gross, and it would be bad for Outway and it's bad for the community. But how has Outway been able to improve and innovate sort of the sock experience? What's your point of differentiation that you point to?
Yeah, I think our point of differentiation is much more on just the average sock versus competitors. I think like there's a lot of people making great socks. However, there's a huge majority of people that just have no idea they should be even considering the socks they wear. So I say that this is such a cool business to be in, such a big opportunity because if you think about it, when we grow up, we're almost taught to hate socks. They're like this present you get during the
Yeah.
holidays as a punishment, right? And then I think you take that mentality into adulthood and begrudgingly buy them at the department store. You don't think about it. However, you start to think about everything else you wear. You start to have your favorite t-shirt, your favorite kind of fabrics, your pants, your shoes, but no one really has a favorite sock. I mean, there's some people that do and it's growing, but the majority of people don't have a favorite pair of socks. And so, what makes us different is I think we've found a way to have a sock that I would say is technically one of the best socks in the world. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that like our technical sock is so much better, more innovative than the next one. There's a lot of great sock companies, a lot of great technical socks and athletic socks. We certainly are up there in the top 1% of 1%. But what makes us really special is we found a way to market to the people that never think about socks. And the way we do that is through our design. So we have a lot of unique designs. Like our designs certainly are more unique and original than any other provider on the market by far. And they're very differentiated in the way they look. If you see a design of ours, like they're just so much different than any other sock brand, and you could very see that out in public. You don't need to. We very rarely even like have our logo or name. Our logo's on the sock, but you can't really see it from far away. And our logo, our name is not on the sock, but you can very tell by the design aesthetic from a distance. Um, and what that does is we're able to advertise that online or in store, and people see the design that's got some emotional attachment to it. So we have design categories that we use, like animals, nature, fun, food, abstract. And these are all meant to kind of have some sort of relation with the buyer. Like put a cat on a sock, someone's a cat person, they're going to buy the cat socks. And we designed it in a way that pops out and it's still not tacky. I mean, there's a very fine line between tacky design and thoughtful design. We really work hard on that. All of our socks are very thoughtfully designed and not tacky. But that initial reason someone is purchasing the socks is not because they're actually thinking about, I need new socks, especially not thinking I need $22 pair of socks. That initial gut reaction for most people is like, that's ridiculous. I could go buy a 10 pack for 15 bucks. Um, so they buy it for the design and then they put the sock on. They're like, oh my God, this is life changing. This feeling like, what is this sock? I bought it for the cat, but now I can't believe how good this pair of sock is. So that's what the differentiator for us has been is one, we found a way to make the unaware market aware through design. Because what we see now in the data is people make that initial purchase and they'll come back about 30 days later and fill their entire sock drawer. They'll come back and buy a ton of our basic whites, blacks. And for the longest time, we couldn't figure out why. We're like, okay, why are we selling so many of our basic designs? But every time we hear about why someone buys them, it's because of the design. Like this isn't making sense. But they're coming back the second time to basically fill out the rest of their drawer for their daily basics. And they're like, oh my God, like I can never go back to a regular sock again. I now have a sock brand. I'm a sock person. It's really funny. We're like converting people into sock people. So um, honestly, I think this is probably like the first time I've been able to articulate this clearly as well, because it's been like almost 10 years of just figuring it out. Because it
Yeah.
is like really complex to think through that entire journey. But what really differentiates us is like it's the best sock, but there's lots of great socks. But the way we're able to make the unaware consumer aware is, I think, what makes it special.
That's so interesting because now I'm even just thinking about like coming back from a work trip recently, and I've got my dress socks, I've got the socks that I wear in my like not my running shoes, but like just the shoes that I'm wearing when I have time to kill, and then I've got my running shoes when I'm working out, and I've got socks to go with those shoes, right? So like
Yeah.
it makes sense that like you'd have one sock that I could then wear, across all those 3 different activities I'm doing while I'm away, right? And maybe I'm dressing it up for an evening, but I can wear that same sock if I'm going for a walk or if I'm going for a run, right? So interesting.
That's why your luggage is so big, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I've got a ton of socks in there and a ton of shoes, but obviously, Rob, we're obviously going to be, talking about this and kind of glossing over, I think, a lot of the story here. But I think just from, from our perspective, we wanted to ask you about like, what it's like, pitching, for investment or pitching for additional people to come in on board with the sock committee. I think certainly with that sock craze that you mentioned in 2008, I think that lends itself nicely to, to your company's founding in 2016, but certainly still, saturated market. There's a lot of socks out there. What was it like, I guess, pitching, the idea of a sock company and getting people to get on board with that?
Yeah, I'd say like, well, the one thing we did differently is we bootstrapped the business for quite a while. So like, I didn't actually try to go out there and pitch it to investors.
Hmm.
That probably would have been hard, honestly. Like first time founder, building a sock business, which people still kind of laugh at. I see like I run a sock business, and they're kind of like, "Oh, cool! Like, when are you going to get a real job?" Like, well, it's the biggest sock company in Canada, but we'll do our best. Um, but but yeah, it's so like it would have been tough. So I'd say when we did eventually raise money in 5 years in 2021, and at that time there was just enough of a track record. So like it wasn't necessarily like pitching, we're selling socks to a specialist. Like here's what the business has been doing, and here's the potential opportunity if you get in now. And then there's like, I think generally speaking, if we're going to speak more broadly, like what advice would I give to anyone pitching anything? Generally speaking, those early stages, investors are betting on the jockey, not the horse. So it could have been socks, it could have been toothpaste, it could have been tissue. It doesn't really matter. They're going to look at who's running this business. Do they have some sort of unique advantage or some sort of unique insight that makes them somewhat of an A player in that industry? Like they're going to really go for it and excel. Um, and what are the likelihood that they're going to pull it off or be resilient enough over the long period to actually pull it off? So um, I'd say like when I didn't need to do it in the early stages, but when I went to go raise money, it was just the track record that raised it. We raised $3.2 million in 24 hours. Like that's how much demand there was for the business because it was just such a great business. And we had shown over 5 years that we bootstrapped and doubled our growth every year while building a profitable business brand that people loved. And I'd say like the number one advice I've got for raising money is just build a business worth investing. It's the easiest thing in the world, right? It's very difficult to go raise money for an idea because like then it's really a gamble for the most part. And so like in that sense, that you are betting on the jockey, not the horse. And so your best opportunity there is to just tell the best story you possibly can. Ideally, probably calling back to some times in your life, not necessarily a business where you've overcome hardship or you've done hard things. So when I was initially building my network, I shared stories in the business and in my sporting career where I had proven that it was obvious that I was against some odds and overcame them and accomplished great things, whether it was in sport or early days of business. And it's just proving to those people that, you're resilient and you're someone that can pull this off. And so I'd say it was, yeah, developing a track record, talking about the hard things you've done previously, and then telling a great story is certainly the key to fundraising on a new business. And then if it's a business with a track record, then you've hopefully built something worth investing in. Because in the end of the day, investors, like their number one motivation is how do I make money, right? Like that's or they're doing it for their ego. And so then your number one goal is like, how do you create FOMO? Because like there's
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, because everyone's driven by a bit of that. So you have to understand the incentive and motivation of the investor too. Like I'd say like there's a primary driver and it maybe toggles between those two things. Like all of them want to make money, but sometimes their primary driver is just not being left out or they want to have this certain brand on their, on their portfolio or whatever. So understanding the value exchange is important as well. But I think just building a business that's generally investable is the easiest way to get investment.
Yeah, and I think you're really demonstrating, obviously knowledge that you've gained through Outway, but we mined your bio a little bit, and it seems that you have some experience as an advisor to investor as well. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how some of that experience has also helped you in sort of the decisions you've made. We often talk about the entrepreneurs that we've had on, sometimes there's a decision not to go after a large strategic, either investment or manufacturing opportunity. And it was better to sit it out and wait a while. So if you could talk about how sort of that experience has led to what you've done in the company.
Yeah, so like I made a bit of money back in 2021. Um, Honestly, when I raised money for my business, I sold some of my personal shares. It's called a secondary. And one thing that was important to me was taking a chunk of that money and reinvesting it in other young founders and going out there and trying to support others. And I would be lying if there wasn't like some ego part attached to it too. And this is where the lesson comes in. Is like I think I got overextended on just having the ability and wanting to like invest in brands versus truly validating them. So like the lesson I've learned there is to your point of like I would have preferred in hindsight sitting out on probably 80% of the investments I did. And really, I wish I allocated all the money I didn't go to the other 20% that that came along. And I wish my bar was higher. And when I did have conviction, I wish I invested more because there's certainly I have invested in I think about 16 or 17 private companies. So not a small amount. And generally like not small amounts of money either. Like I'm not talking like we're talking like at least five-figure amounts in most cases. Um, so not a small amount of money and not a small amount of businesses, but of those, it's very clear now what my criteria should look like. And I think like maybe the only way to get to the point I am now is to have gone through that period of making the bad investments.
Sure.
I will say not one of them has gone out of business yet, so that's good. There's some that I would bet all my portfolio money they're going to go out of business, but like in the end of the day, the ones that I'm most proud of is the ones that like um, where I was betting on the founder. I was thinking about this the other day because this is one business I invested in. And I'm very unhappy with the way the founder is executing as well as the lack of communication they have with their investor base. And I thought back to like I tried to ask myself like, what was I thinking when I invested in that business? I loved the business in the sense that like if I was running this would
Right.
be a great idea, but that's not the point. I'm not running that business, and I never actually assessed that founder. So they told a good story. I was like, oh, this idea is really great. So I invested in the idea, not I invested in the horse, not the jockey in that sense. And I would say the lesson learned among the ones that are not working right now is I invested in the idea and like the horse and not the jockey. And the ones where I was like, one of my best investments is in a founder that didn't even really have his idea formulated at the time. But I was like, okay, and it was one of my bigger checks. So I was like, this guy is just going to figure it out. And that was an investment in the founder, and that's a business that was a startup and has already paid dividends and is growing like crazy. So that one's crushing it. Um, and doing really well. And that was a bet on the founder. So I think that goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier. Like when you're raising money, people are betting on you. Um, and I'm actually basically working through this with you guys right now because like I haven't really thought about that deeply. And I'm
Yeah,
just thinking
yeah,
about
that's
that one
fair.
example. And so I think that is the lesson, and it's cool to be able to just articulate that here. Is that like yeah, what I've learned is yeah, it's better to bet like figure out like what are you actually betting on in these situations. And if I'm to relate that back to our business now, we're certainly much more patient in Outway around the decisions we make, the people we partner with, the decisions. Like it's all about extending the time horizon for our current business and being like, are we happy with this decision in 5 years? Because that really that if you ask yourself that question, you stop solving short-term problems at the expense of creating long-term problems, and that saves you a lot of pain. And ultimately, sometimes that looks like slower growth up front, but longevity on the back end, which I would argue is way more beneficial because the power of compounding in business is just wonderful. It just takes time. But a lot of people want quick wins, and quick wins usually come at the expense of longevity. And in business and building a career, longevity is your superpower. Um, so yeah, I don't know, long-winded answer, but I'd say
No,
like
it's
what I've
good.
learned is like figure out who you're betting on and why, and then just be patient. I mean, like
Yeah.
wait for the big swings. It's not worth it with the small stuff. Don't spread yourself thin.
Yeah, and I think that I'll just interject briefly, Mike. I know you wanna ask another question. It's just I did a little bit of this kind of investing at a previous role, and it's so true. What's really resonating with me is you put yourself in the CEO chair, too quickly sometimes, where it's like I already see the idea how I would sell it, how it would, and you gotta balance that with, well, who's actually on the team now, because you're not going to go be the CEO of that company. You're going to be the investor, which is a different role. So that was
Yeah.
really impactful, what you said there.
Yeah, I just taught myself that too, honestly, when I said
Yeah,
it. So
yeah,
that's why I like doing these things too. It's forcing you to kind of think through these things. Like, when else are you gonna really sit down and be like, let me analyze my motivations for doing these
yeah,
things, right? So that's why
yeah,
I love doing these sorts of things too.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
No, that's great. And one of the things we wanted to ask you, and I know that obviously throughout the course of your entrepreneurial journey, like you've learned a lot of things just by some of those examples you've just shared. But Steve and I work with a lot of students who are working with us in applied research, but a lot of them want to form their own companies and want to become entrepreneurs either while they're at college or after they graduate. I guess looking back on your journey, knowing that you told us earlier that you didn't necessarily go to college thinking you were going to start a business, but if you could look back, what would be one thing, or was there something that you wish you would have had when you were younger, that maybe would have prepared you a little bit better for starting a business while you were in college? Or maybe there were some great things at Commito that you were able to tap into, but I'm just thinking selfishly as somebody who's now been tasked with setting up some entrepreneurial supports here at Cambrian. What's one thing that Rob would have wanted to have available to him as he started to think about entrepreneurship as an alternative career path?
Yeah. Honestly, I think what I didn't have, which I would have benefited from, was just access to some mentors. I think mentor is a bit of a I use that word kind of like hesitantly. What I really would want is like, if you guys are building this out, what I would say is if you could build a network of people like, me now. So if you had a student that was really interested, like I'm generally open to like answering a few questions over email, right? And so like what I didn't have at the time was a model. I didn't have someone to be like, this is what entrepreneurship is. This is some of the mistakes that are very common and I shouldn't make. And unfortunately, being somewhat hard-headed and ego-driven back then, I've improved on that. But like I didn't also seek out and ask questions. I was like, I'll figure this out. I've got this. Like I'm different. Like the reality is we're just not, and I made every mistake every entrepreneur makes. And so some of the big mistakes I made early on were some of those short term, like not a big deal, long term big deal. And they've been kind of one was I got into business with a co-founder, but we didn't have any real discussions around our values, what it meant to work hard, what our ultimate goals with the business were. And that ended up in about 2 years into like an explosion where he left the business and it cost me $150,000 to buy him out. So like that's an expensive mistake that was solvable by like a discussion and a $5,000 shareholder agreement. Just like today, that could be done actually for free just with AI. Like just go to ChatGPT and get a shareholder agreement drawn up with some very basic concepts. So like just not even knowing to have those discussions and not knowing to have those types of agreements. Like I didn't expect the business to work, although I like wanted it to work and I was fully dedicated to the business. Like I didn't do any research on our brand name and trademarks, and so we had to rebrand 5 years in. That was super painful, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was legal threats, and so it's all those little things of like, you know, what are the common mistakes that a lot of founders make, and how do you avoid those? Like my kind of simple analogy here is that like in business, there's no replicable path to success. So every path to success is different and is unique, and there's not one founder walks the same path. However, on all of those paths, there are the same mistakes that a lot of founders make. So the same potholes exist on all the individual paths, and you can avoid those. You just literally don't need to hit them. There will be unique problems that are unique to you that are ununique to the path, but like on each one, there is like 100 mistakes that everyone is going to face, and you can actually just avoid those by asking questions. And so I'd say like for anyone that is looking to start, and for you guys, it would be kind of curating a list of what are the most common things that jam founders up. That would be co-founder disputes, conversations around values. It would be IP, protect your brand name, ensure that it's not going to have a conflict. Like, and it's not so much things around like build your business plan, come with your projections. Like that stuff's all fluffy and doesn't matter. In the end of the day, the things that really matter is values, who you're in business with, what the ultimate goals are, what problem are you solving, does the product add value, is there actually a market there? So it's really just going down this list of like a checklist you guys could create, maybe some mentors that people can ask like slightly deeper questions to. That's what I didn't have, that's what I didn't seek out, and it really cost me a lot of money, like a lot of money. Probably a lot of those mistakes over time have cost me over $1 million.
Yeah.
Easy.
Well, and I think you really crystallized that. Thank you for being so honest and open to say that, because I think that is an important thing, and you can build programming through mentorship to a degree to alleviate some of those. You don't ever want to rid the entrepreneur of the valuable experiences you got, but perhaps you can lessen the blow of those
Mhm.
mistakes by offering some of these stories. Um, I'm gonna get back to Outway, and then Mike's gonna have some fun at the end. But I just would, to the degree that you're able to, I don't know how to ask this in a way that doesn't detract from your current product offering, but what is next for Outway and Custom Labs? Are we looking at other garments, or where do you think you could take us to the degree that you're able to tell us that would sort of excite our listeners?
I'm not sure I have an exciting answer for you, unfortunately. But what I will tell
That's
you
all
is,
right.
what I haven't gone over is you mentioned the both brands. So Outway is like our branded sock line where we have our own designs, our own brand. You go on our website or shop in store, and you can buy our athletic socks. Custom Lab is our sister company where we actually make socks for other people. So that's like more of a promotional company where we make socks for brands like Disney, Red Bull, all the way down to the local hockey team. Really, that business was birthed out of this understanding that we've built this engine. We have the supply chain and product knowledge. Other people need socks. There's another business we could build here. So we actually have like those two different business models, which rely on different market conditions and they're different teams. And so that's been a really cool thing. Is like we run two separate businesses in the sock space, but they're completely different and have different cash flow models and all of that. So Outway is the bigger business of the two, and that's where I spend the majority of my time. I've got a really great leader in Custom Lab, a general manager of that business, and it's about Outway is about a little over two times the size of Custom Lab, but yeah, so two businesses. What's next with Custom Lab in particular? We do have a broader offering. We do custom socks. We also do custom headwear, beanies, and caps. We also do some custom apparel, t-shirts, hoodies, etc. The bulk of that business is still custom socks. Custom caps is going to catch up probably over the next couple of years. We're building out really robust supply chain there right now, and there's huge opportunity in custom headwear. So that business will continue to expand its product offering, but it'll primarily stick in kind of head and toe, so caps and socks. Um, and then on Outway, socks are a $50 billion market globally. And within North America, there's about 10 billion of market opportunity. Obviously, we're a niche in there, but it's such a large opportunity and we're such a small sliver of that currently. I think the question just comes down to, do we need to do more things and expand more markets or maximize more of the opportunity that we currently have? The cool thing about, which I kind of alluded to earlier, which I recognize might have sounded like a little cocky, and that's why I not try to be. It's like, oh, we're the best stock company in Canada.
Not at
I'm
all.
proud of
Not at
that.
all.
I'm proud of that because like that when we started as like there was no Canadian stock company, and we really wanted to kind of like claim home turf and really go after that. But there's just so much more opportunity to expand into North America and become one of the largest sock companies in the world. Because the other cool thing, I mentioned how the sock space is fairly anti-competitive in the sense that people don't think about socks. So like when I need to go acquire a new customer, I'm not worried about my competitors and trying to steal one of their customers. I'm going to go get the 90+% of people that don't even know that socks are a thing they should be thinking about. So that's one thing. Um, the second thing is that other companies starting, say they're apparel companies, they don't really have a reverse incentive to be like, oh, we're killing it with hoodies and pants and all these other things. Let's go spin up a sock line because like the margins suck, the volumes suck. They need to find new facilities because where they do their cut and sew manufacturing, they're not often knitwear facilities, so they need to go figure that out. And so we operate in this kind of interesting niche and zone where there's not a ton of incentive for competitors to enter because it's just business on hard mode. But if you do it long enough and well enough, there is a ton of opportunity. And so it took us years to kind of like come up with that. I'd say every year prior to this one, our growth strategy was try and introduce a new hero product. We've launched things like neckwear, like buffs. We've launched headbands. We've launched underwear. We've launched sports bras. We've done caps, sunglasses, accessories. So we've tried different products. Also, what we found each time was like our customers had their favorite cap brand. They had their favorite. They already shopped at Buff. They liked where they bought their underwear. Were we making a better sports bra than Lulu? No, we weren't. Were we making better socks than Lulu? Yes, we are. So we're like, we're actually one of the leaders in this space. Let's just double, triple, quadruple down on it. And so this year, we actually made the decision like no new product development. We're going to focus on just selling our product in more places. So this year we actually went on, instead of product line expansion, channel expansion. So primarily we were sold direct to consumer through our own website at the beginning of this year. And that was like the majority of our sales, 99% of our sales. Now we're in retail nationwide and in the US as well. We're sold on Amazon, Canada, and US, and we sell on our own store. And then we have custom labs. So we have 4 different distinct sales channels now with distribution all throughout North America, really increasing our footprint, no pun intended, of where people can, buy us. So that has been incredibly successful. And now that we've laid the foundation for all of these channels, we can now scale much further into them. We've just scratched the surface with Amazon, and it's scaling incredibly well. And then wholesale just scratched the surface. D2C, there's still tons of opportunity. We've on a very, very, very conservative model, we've anticipated there's a $25 million direct-to-consumer opportunity in just socks in Canada. That's like incredibly niche and conservative, probably much bigger. You'd rationally say it's 10 times the size in the States. So there's $250 million opportunity just in D2C. Then you bolt on Amazon, you bolt on wholesale. One of our kind of goals is to be the first $1 billion sock business. And I think that's possible, like in revenue, not in valuation, in revenue.
Right.
We'd hit valuation at like maybe 250 million in revenue. So like, valuation is probably within reach in the next few years. But in terms of revenue, it's possible, which is really exciting. So the long-winded answer to your question again is basically there is no product development outside of socks because socks is a huge market. Within socks, though, we are increasing the options. So like if you go on our site, it's not just one sock. We've got not only a variety of designs, like over 200 designs. We then have socks available from no show to knee high. So like no show, ankle, quarter through, knee high. We've got youth, we've got all the adult sizes. And then within that, we've got different yarn types. You could do athletic yarns, you could do merino wool. We're working on a third option, which is going to be more of a cotton-like feel, but not cotton because cotton's just inherently not athletic. But yeah, so that's kind of like how we think about it. And within all of those categories, there's still so much more opportunities to expand even our sock offerings. There's so much we could do in distribution. So yeah, I'll wrap it all up in a nice little lesson for you. It's just an extreme focus on the core thing because the core thing is often a much larger market than you think. And it's like until you fully maximize that opportunity, what are you doing? Kind of like diverting your focus on something else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well said on that point. And I think you've done an excellent job, I think, at articulating why people should buy your socks. But since we're going to be dropping this episode just as the Christmas holidays are kind of getting, or Christmas holiday shopping season is starting, for those listeners and viewers who haven't been converted by this point, what would be the last word you would leave them with as to why they should buy, Outway or Custom Lab socks going into the holiday season?
Oh man, honestly, they'll just change your life. Like if you just haven't had a great pair of socks, the there is some study, I gotta find it, but there's a study that said like the feeling of excitement and joy you get from a fresh pair of socks that are feel great are much higher than the joy you get of any other piece of clothing you put on. So that alone, that they're gonna make you happy. If this is dropping during the Christmas kind of like ramp ups here, we're likely gonna have a ton of promotions on. When we're recording this now, we're about to enter our holiday promotion season tomorrow, and that'll go all the way up until December 15th. So there will be a lot of time. There'll be lots of promotions. So like, if what I've told you and said here is not enough to be like, I need to try these, I'd say like the fact that they're going to be on an incredible deal is probably good enough. They also make great gifts. Like you don't need to know anything really about the person. You can just like they're a unisex product. You kind of have to just guess their shoe size, which is pretty simple. The shoe size range, so they come in very large ranges. Um, so like they make great gifts. Like you can get a gift under $20, right? So and it brings a lot of joy. So I don't know, other than they're life changing, but don't take my word for it. Like just
Other than their life changing.
yeah, just like, but like, like go read one of our thousands of reviews and kind of make your own choice. I'm not really here to try and convince people. Like, I think once they try the product like that's when you'll understand. Because I expect people not to trust me. Like, I have a huge incentive to try and get someone to buy a pair of socks.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, what drives me is those thousands of 5-star reviews where people are like, these are amazing. That's what we do it for.
That's awesome. I could tell you that I did have the website open while we were doing this, and I think my mom's getting some of these Zero Fox quarter socks because she has foxes in her backyard, and I think that'd be a good touch for me. So
Well, exactly. See, that's exactly why people initially purchase. Like they realize like some connection with design with some family member themselves, and like that's one of our best selling socks right now for sure.
That's awesome. Rob, thank you so much for spending more than you agreed to with us, but we really appreciate your time and telling us about your journey so far and what you've been up to. And it's been a real pleasure. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. And if you want to learn more, our site's outway.com. So outway.com. And if you want to find me or learn more, I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn at Rob Fraser, ROBBFRASER. You can find me there, and I'm pretty receptive to questions async. So if you send me a DM, I can usually get back to people with thoughtful things. I don't do calls typically, but yeah, I'm happy to help, especially people on the journey. Like, you got a quick question or you want a resource, like reach out for sure. Happy to
That's
help.
perfect. That's
Awesome. We appreciate that, Rob. Yeah, thanks again. And we'll be sure to link to the company and to yourself in the show notes.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
So Steve and I aren't doing outros anymore, but the only reason I'm doing an outro right now is for the people that have been watching the episode on YouTube. And the reason I'm doing this is because you may or may not have noticed that there's Taylor Swift pictures all over my office. And the reason was, back in November, I went to see Taylor Swift, and my team, I guess, while I was away from the office on Friday, with so much, I guess they found time because they're always busy. So they obviously they cut into their lunch break. I'm sure they cut into one of their breaks, and they wallpapered my office with Taylor Swift pictures and quotes. But I think the piece that really topped it off for me was that they took a skeleton mannequin that we have, which was for an actual project, and they outfitted it with clothes that Taylor Swift would probably wear in autumn. And then when I opened my door on Monday morning, they had a speaker in here that was set to play Taylor Swift as soon as I opened the door. And I won't repeat what I said on this broadcast because it's not suitable for work. But needless to say, that is why you see Taylor, on my whiteboard. I think they actually managed to put her face over Wayne Gretzky. Yeah, there she is again. So anyway, that is just so everyone understands why this is going on. I have not yet taken these down yet, just because I am a Swiftie. I've no issues with that, so she'll stay for as long as she needs to.
That could be true, or this is the most elaborate con to be able to tell people that you're a big Swift fan and you just happen to have a lot of her pictures around your office. All I can say is I wasn't there for this when people set it up, so it can't be traced back to me. But it seems like you had a good time at the concert, and Mike, it's been a few days since you've been back and you haven't taken them down. So I don't know what that says.
It just says that, yeah, I don't know. I have nothing.
Maybe you like it.
I've never hidden my my fandom for Taylor Swift. I'm not about to start now. So
Yeah.
anyway, just wanted to give that a little that little note there. But of course, having listened to the podcast, if you're we're still airing this at the time. There's an opportunity for you to take advantage of the sales that Rob mentioned for Outway and Custom Labs. So again, we'll link to those two companies in the show notes. Christmas is just around the corner. Holidays are just around the corner. So again, I think Rob said it best when he said they're life altering. That was his words. So I think the only way that you can truly figure that out is to try a pair of Outway or Custom Lab socks for yourself.
They really knock your socks off.
Ooh, there you go. There he is. He's back. And we'll be back with another episode in January.
Bye-bye.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.